Now there's Sherman looking very tough. You know, I had that different looking Sherman the other day, which I really love that picture. You don't have to worry about that door, it's not bothering me. A little air doesn't hurt me. I'm a big fellow, and I need a little air every now and then anyway. But here, of course, is Nathan Bedford Forrest, and so we're going to follow this idea of what Forrest might or might not have done. I just wrote an essay on this question and tried to explain sort of what I thought, and I'm borrowed heavily from that. Okay, follow Forrest to the death if it costs 10,000 lives and breaks the treasury. There will never be peace in Tennessee. He might have actually meant in the world, if it wasn't for Forrest, till Forrest was dead, or if it wasn't for Forrest being around, and he wanted him eliminated. So Sherman is pretty much targeting Forrest as somebody that's a thorn in his side at the very minimum, and someone who is worthy of extermination on the other side, but not for moral reasons, but for military reasons. All right, here's the situation in 1864. So many of you already know all these things, but I have a room full of students that don't know a whole lot, so I always try to remind them the Eastern Theater is everything from the Georgia line up. So if there had been a raid at St. Albans, we'll just make that up, Vermont. We'll just make that up. That'd be an Eastern Theater. So all the way from the north, wherever that might be, down to the Georgia line. From Georgia to the Mississippi River would be the Western Theater, and from the Mississippi River on would be the Trans-Mississippi. As I have to explain to my students, that means across the Mississippi. So everything we're looking at here will be in the Western Theater, as we have been so far, and it's not in the East. Now that doesn't mean that matters in the East don't matter, they do. Certainly I think Sherman, as I pointed out the other day, was aware of what Grant was doing, and any chance he had to do something that Grant did was a sort of fun type of thing. The military, like everything else, especially at the top or toward the top, has people who have egos. They wouldn't be where they were if they didn't have egos. You don't have to be a McClellan or a Douglas MacArthur or someone else to have an ego. I wasn't going to say Montgomery, but if you want to pick somebody on that side, and God knows I wasn't going to pick Patton because he's a quiet little wallflower. So, America certainly has its share of folks, and again, we could have picked somebody from Russia and Soviet Union and so forth and so on. But these individuals do, they're proud people. They have heritage and background. Many of them knew each other. The whole point that there would be people who knew that Hood was more likely to be aggressive. But then again, if the person that's above you has just been relieved of command, couldn't necessarily mean you're not fired, but in this case you are fired, then he's going to do several things that the other guy didn't do, or not do some of the things the other guy did. So, when you say, well, wonder what he might have done different, I maybe attacked that second time and said, we're not going to do any better. Let's just find a way to get out of this. And maybe get out earlier with less losses, and maybe the hope that by the time Atlanta's fall had a significant impact on any kind of elections. And by the way, the person who seemed to be acutely aware of that kind of thing was Robert E. Lee. He seemed to be acutely aware of politics. A lot of these other generals, I don't know how much aware of politics or how much they care. Sherman hated newspapers. So Sherman wouldn't have told newspapers anything anyway, and he wouldn't have worried about newspapers. In fact, he would prefer to arrest them and hang a whole bunch of them, which is not a good way to get your message across. I'm just saying. You may wish that was the case. You may have preferred that to be the case. That's not the greatest case in the world. And by the way, one quick side about Thomas before I quit on him entirely. I love Thomas at Peachtree Creek because he reverted to his old artillery roots. One of my favorite images is him slapping the horses on the rear as they go by. Now, I don't really think he necessarily did that. Maybe he did in his mind. Maybe people thought he did. Because if you're in front of a limber that's flying through the thing and you're close enough to hit the horse in the rear, you're probably dead anyway. It probably ran over you. So sometimes these people, Ed always talks about the pictures of hub to hub. And he says you can never get artillery hub to hub because you can't get through there. But I think from a distance it looks closer, and it's just sort of a hyperbole for writers. Okay, here's the left, in case you couldn't tell. I put blue on it. I probably shouldn't have. I probably should have put gray, since Hood's still hanging on. And Memphis in blue. The Yankees are there. And then I put Bryce's. I could have put Tupelo and some other things, but I was just kind of giving you an idea of some of the names we will be following and some of the places that we will be looking at. And the fact that, of course, Sherman is targeting, that's why I picked blue. Sherman was targeting Atlanta, and of course, the Federals held Memphis, and those two might come into some impact. Now, there's my buddy Sherman again in his child look there that I'm so proud of. And there's the march down to Atlanta that we followed, and that Gordon has done such a superb job of telling us about in general, with, of course, Joe Johnston being the primary Confederate trying to hold the course until when he gets later. All right, Sherman to Cadwalader to Washburn. We are now in all motion for Georgia. We want you to hold Forrest until we strike Joe Johnston. And I think that's the key right there for what Sherman wants to do to Nathan Bedford Forrest, that will keep Nathan Bedford Forrest tied down and keep him from doing anything of any dramatic or serious nature to Sherman's supply lines. Now, remember Gordon talked about Augusta having powder works and other things. Why not march to Augusta? Well, what are you going to do for supplies? How are you going to get an army taken care of? Although eventually he solves that problem, does he not? It was called the March to the Sea. He didn't have a supply line there. So at this point, war is still, of course, evolving. But Sherman's tried different things. He's burned some things in Mississippi before he ever gets to Georgia. And I wouldn't want to be in Columbia, South Carolina for all the money in Texas if he happens to ever show up there. I'm just saying, I wouldn't want to be up there in the Carolinas. But my point is it's not as if you have this moment where everything after it is identical or they've learned the exact lesson that they'll apply. They're always continuing to grow and develop and learn. And Forrest was that way. Forrest had 6 months of formal education. He used to say, I never saw a pin that I didn't think of a snake. I understand that. I grew up in Tidewater, Virginia. When I went through the peanut fields and the corn fields on my farm in Suffolk, when I wasn't shoveling for my dad at the horse barn, when I was walking through the field, I was always looking down. I said, well, what are you looking down for? It wasn't Civil War memorabilia or relics, because we didn't have any Civil War battle on my farm. Okay? It wasn't even Indian arrowheads, although that would have been romantic. It wasn't dinosaur bones, although they came to play in Atlanta. We already know the dinosaur was a significant secret weapon that almost turned the day for the Germans. I mean, for the Nazis. I mean, V1, V2, and D1, right? Dinosaur 1. So anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that I was looking down for water moccasins, because we had water moccasins. Those are snakes. You know, copperheads. No, not copperheads. The cottonmouths. Cottonmouths. I was trying to do a euphemism for it. Anyway, we did not, I don't think we had copperheads on our farm. We had a lot of black snakes. Black snakes like mice, and mice are, a good thing to eat, so I'm not going to complain too much about that. But if a snake scared me, it died for the privilege. I don't like snakes, okay? So apparently Forrest didn't like snakes either. So he said, I never saw a pin that I didn't think of a snake. And when he spoke, he spoke in a very straightforward way. Fight is F-I-T-E, fact. I'm a fact. It's a right nice night tonight. I had a friend who actually said that. She's from one of the 6 original Floridians from Florida. You know, the rest of them from somewhere else, up north, from up in the Caribbean, somewhere else, Cuba, whatever. But she was actually from Florida, and it's a right nice night tonight. And bless her heart, that's how she said it. And when he wrote the word fight, it's F-I-T-E. That's how he wrote it. So we're going to talk about his writing and how important that is here in just a minute. Because he had an idea in his brain. He was not stupid. In fact, if you thought he was stupid or underestimated him, so much the better for him. He liked that so much better. But hold him into place while we strike at Joe Johnston. Keep him from doing any significant damage. All right, here's Washburn. And he's also going to tell him, don't let Forrest insult you by passing in sight of your command. If he's in the vicinity, you better do something about it. You better do something to, again, attract his attention, keep him busy, take him out, whatever the case, in fact, the maximum might be if you could eliminate him altogether. That might be the absolute first-rate choice if we could have one. All right, here's how I can tie the movies into history a little bit here in Georgia. Drums in the Deep South, I mentioned that, where these West Point friends end up at odds with each other. One up in the north goes north, and one stays in the south, and they fall in love with the same girl, typical Hollywood kind of stuff. And there they are on Devil's Mountain, blocking Sherman's march to the sea. Well, not really, but Hollywood doesn't really care about history that much. Sometimes they will try to create more of a drama than the historical element of it. But they were supposed to theoretically be trying to block that rail line, the Western and Atlantic rail line, toward Atlanta. And they do at least seemingly do that for a period of time until they're blown off. If you want to see the movie, I just gave away the ending, I'm sorry. Until they're blown off of the top of it. Okay, Joe Brown's the governor of Georgia. Joe Brown had a different idea than Confederates on some mythical high ground, bombarding trains as they went by and stopping Sherman in his tracks as he marched towards Atlanta / to the sea. He wanted Nathan Bedford Forrest. There were others who wanted Nathan Bedford Forrest. Forrest had built by this time a reputation as a great raider. Even Braxton Bragg thought he was a pretty good raider. That's about all Braxton Bragg thought of him, but that is what Braxton Bragg thought. In fact, Forrest had a falling out with Bragg because Bragg had a tendency to want to take his cavalry forces that he recruited and raised and trained and prepared away from him to give to quote unquote better prepared and better capable officers. He didn't think of much. He said he's nothing but a damned raider. That's all he is. Now, Forrest will come to see Bragg as someone who needed to be advised as to a better attitude toward me is concerned. So he actually approached him, although Dave Powell, my dear friend, who insists that there's no way this could happen, but then Dave Powell is not from the South. Dave Powell's from Chicago. Of course, we can't ever have anything useful to Forrest from the North, so there you go. But Dave Powell wants to argue all day long he was not there. I was not there. So I cannot confirm by seeing it myself. They always want corroboration. Supposedly, when Thomas said those things in Stones River, supposedly not that many people heard it, and so did he really say those things? Well, there are records that he said that, and it fits his personality. I always use that as my mechanism. Does it fit his personality? Does it work? Does it make sense? And for Thomas, it makes sense. There's no better place to die than here when this army cannot retreat, because later on he says that same kind of thing at Snodgrass Hill and Horseshoe Ridge. And he does it and wins Rock of Chickamauga there. So it sort of fits. But we want corroboration. Now, have you ever been in a room where somebody said something over here and you didn't hear it? Well, you have, because I know you said things back there I didn't hear. I'm half deaf anyway. I don't have one of these. I don't have an ability to have somebody project so I'll actually hear it. And so there's actually times I'll be sitting at a table at a restaurant. And I can hear these 3 people, but I can't hear those 3 people, or those 5 people, or those 50 people. Did that mean I didn't say something? No, it didn't mean I didn't say something. So it fits his personality. Now, this is what supposedly Nathan Bedford Forrest said to Bragg. He said, "You've taken away my command, and that's unacceptable." Except he didn't put it that way. "You have played the part of a coward and are a scoundrel. If you were any part of a man, I'd slap your jaws and force you to resent it. You may as well not issue any more orders to me, for I will not obey them. And if you ever endeavor to cross my path again, it will be at the peril of your life." Can you imagine saying that to your boss? I can imagine saying that. I didn't say it. You know, we in our profession, we call them deans. Deans. You never get far enough up to president. But, you know, you want to tell a few deans like that. You know what I'm saying? And Forrest is supposed to have then said that, and his kinsman who was with him and reported this said, "You're in for it now." Because he knew Bragg was liable to get him. You know, Bragg was a tough customer. Bragg was the kind of guy that when he, in his pre-war experience, had issued an order in a post when he held one position, to himself as commander of the post, only to reject it as commander of the post and send back a message to himself that he had rejected it. Can you imagine that kind of personality that's going to take an order, ask for something, be told no by yourself, send the message back, and then what? I don't know. It seems like to me you want to put something like that in a home, a hospital with some special care, somebody that can actually give them, make sure they get the Jell-O and the other things that they're supposed to get, the soft, and as they say on television, especially in the States these days, the wearables. You know, you can't have anything you actually ingest or actually take, you actually wear it now. I think that's funny. I've got sleep apnea. I still think I'd rather have a machine. I don't like things poked in me. I don't know. I'm just crazy. All right. So Joe Brown wants Forrest. Forrest has already run in with Bragg. Of course, Bragg is now long gone, but Forrest has moved west because he had that falling out with Bragg, and they decided to give him a place where he might be more free to move. Now, in a few minutes, you're going to hear a familiar name, and you're going to wonder, how can he be in two places at one time? And why is it that he couldn't learn from one experience not to do the same thing again later? His name is Stephen Dill Lee. Stephen Dill Lee will be at Tupelo, Harrisburg. What will he do? Frontal assaults that are fruitless and cost men their lives. Then he gets promoted. Because isn't that what we do? We promote you. More incompetent. I'm sorry, the better you show how foolish you can be, the higher you go. Higher you get. And then we're going to send him east to be in Atlanta at Ezra Church, but that's a whole nother ballgame. And he didn't have that long to be there before he then had to fight that battle. So he didn't have much time to adapt, and his experience, he apparently didn't learn as much as he should. Now, he was a good artillerist. He was a good commander at different levels. So John Bell Hood, who wouldn't want him at the lower level? He was a fighter, a tough fighter. Put him in Gaines Mill, put him somewhere, unless he doesn't get all his body parts shot off, he's pretty good. But put him in charge of an army? I don't think so. Who said that? Robert E. Lee. He didn't quite put it that way, but he did put it and say it. All right, so here we are. I love this to death. I'm going to stand over here so you don't block Gordon, because I know Gordon will love this. Here we are. The Federal armies advanced toward Georgia in 1864, and in her diary, in her record, she says, "My dear cousin, we were constantly assured the Yankees would never get here." I honestly think there's a lot of that scarlet mentality, of that mentality of Georgia here caught up in that. And then, but those horrid Yankees, how can I see them enter this place? She's in Marietta, Georgia. I'm so afraid of them. And here what happens. Now you got to watch this carefully. Everybody stay awake. Watch. Boom! There they go. It's called refugeeing. And where are we going? South. It's genius. I don't care. South to Atlanta. South to Atlanta. All right, here, Gordon, this is for you. Miss Pitty Pat. Oh, she's faded. Those horrid Yankees. Oh, those horrid Yankees. She might even open a restaurant somewhere in heaven. Some kind of eatery. All right, secrets to success. I just think Forrest is one of those people that if you kind of get some of his maxims, if you want to call them that. You know, my friend James I. Bud Robertson Jr., who I love to death, he was the greatest guy in the world. Bud has gone on to join Stonewall Jackson up in that great campground of the sky, but that's okay. He would talk about Stonewall's maxims. Well, Forrest didn't have anybody that really wrote these down. They just pop up from time to time. And you can sort of see again where this would probably be something that he said, and it would make sense. Whenever you see anything blue, shoot at it. That's Forrest. Shoot at it and do everything you can to keep up the scare. Now, he would never say scare. He would say skier. S-K-E-E-R. Skier. Keep up the steer. Whenever you meet the enemy, no matter how few there are of you and how many there are of them, show fight. Fight, F-I-T-E. If you show fight, they will think there are more of you and will not push you half so hard. A man in motion is worth two standing. And when he was engaged in raids and sent out this young fellow to get some military intelligence information, the little 15-year-old came back and literally had everything memorized perfectly. He had everything laid out. The streams, the crossroads, everything laid out. And he says, that damn little boy, and I'm sorry to use language like that, that's Forrest, he's kind of that kind of earthy guy, I hope you don't mind. He said, that damn little boy knew more than all my other scouts put together. And he meant it. That damn little boy came back and did for him what he wanted him to do. Now, you do not come to him with what you've heard. If you came to him with what you've heard, he would ask you to dismount and he would chastise you. Now, I'm going to put it a little different way. He'd pull you off your horse, pull off a tree branch and start beating the hell out of you. That's what he would do. And he said, now don't come to me with a pack of damn lies. Because he said, I need to know what's going on. And for him, it's interesting because, again, the man was genius on a very basic level. I need to know where they ain't as well as where they are. I need to know where they ain't. If you're engaged in a raid, you don't want to keep running into them. You want to avoid them sometimes. If you can get around them, so much the better. If you can surround them and capture them, that's even better. But sometimes you just want to avoid them altogether, especially if it's a larger force you don't want to tangle with. So should he come after Sherman's supply lines, you can better believe he's not going to just go blind. He's going to try to gather as much intelligence information as he can and utilize that information in the most effective manner possible. So he's bold. He's going to do something you don't necessarily expect. He wants to know things. He gathers intelligence. He's not afraid to make you think he's going to do something he's not actually going to do. He's not against letting you think he might do something. The fun thing about him going into West Tennessee on a couple of his raids is that he had his people as far away as Ohio dumping supplies in the river so he wouldn't capture them. He wasn't going to Ohio, but he had them worried. And intimidation, he understood that intimidation can get you a long way to accomplish something that your opponent will be unable to counter. Now, I'm going to tell you a little cinematic trick. Okay? You are my army. There's only so many of you. If I'm sure going to have a camera with my capable cameraman in the back, but I'm going to bring him up here, and I'm going to have a camera. I am not going to go past you, and I'm not going to go past Gordon. Because then when we project how many people were here, you will, in your mind, extend the line. That is what Forrest was capable of doing, creating the illusion that he had something until you knew otherwise, and you would not know otherwise, you assumed was much worse than it was. We'll call it the Pinkerton-McClellan fact. Pinkerton-McClellan fact. And if there's McClellan people, I'm sorry, that's actually a good thing. McClellan, wonderful guy. Okay. Go home and meet your cat, and it's okay. Or dog. You probably have a dog. Okay. All right. Forward men and mix with them. Boy, that's really Forrest. Get in there and mix with them. One of the problems you're going to always have with Forrest is he led from the front. He liked to be in there and fight. At Shiloh, when he was supposed to be guarding one of the flanks of the Confederate position, he said, we're not here to guard a little damn creek, we need to go fight. And he went into the battle, even though he was supposed to be there. Now, you're there for a reason. The commanders have put you there for a reason, so the defensive force tried to come on that flank, you'd see it first. So you can imagine what would happen if that had been the case. It wasn't. It turned out he could get into part of the hornet's nest and have fun, capture a Union battery, what the hell, or whatever, because it doesn't really matter. Forrest would do things whether he did them or not. One of my favorite things, a pre-war thing about Forrest, he was involved in an incident in which the newspapers really only mentioned his role in a very tangential way. But as he told the story about it, and as it then got passed down, he became a central figure. Because how can you be Forrest and not be the central figure? We will call that the Trump factor. The Trump factor. I'm not talking politics on this stuff, because Trump is not a Forrest. I would never put that on Forrest. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. All right. Union command in the line of march to Bryce's Crossroads. Now, one of the things that already we've seen is Forrest has a very active 1864. I'm not going to even pick up before the Atlanta campaign started because we don't have time for all of that. But Samuel D. Sturgis and Benjamin Grierson, that does not look like John Wayne, but that's John Wayne. If you ever saw the Horse Soldiers, that's John Wayne. And by the way, he did not like horses, Ben Grierson, because he got kicked in the face by a horse when he was young. I never got kicked in the face by a horse. I did have a horse one time. I opened the door to feed him, and that little son of a gun turned around and kicked me right about here. I did not have as much padding then, although I've never been thin. I've always been stocky. I love that when they call you stocky. The only other, well, I won't tell you the other thing I love, because then everybody start calling me that, and I don't like that. So I won't say. But anyway, just say genius, that's good enough. But if you don't want to call me that, that's okay. If you do, what the heck? Okay, so anyway, Ben Grierson got kicked in the face by a horse, so he didn't like horses, but he ends up doing one of the great cavalry raids of the war. Well, Forrest was a kind of cavalry raider. Ben Grierson had been a music teacher, so wouldn't think of him as being the kind of person to go around. But in the movie, you can't have John Wayne being a music teacher. I don't care how much Black Jack Logan plays the fiddle. John Wayne ain't no fiddle player. And by the way, Ed Barr said he used to like Jeb Stuart, but then he really, when he got wounded and was in the hospital and laid up in World War II, he said, I read about Forrest and I really like Forrest. Forrest didn't have a banjo player. And he's right. He didn't have the bones. He didn't have all the musical stuff. Because Forrest wasn't into that. Well, Grierson in the movie, John Wayne is a section hand. Because think about how traumatic it would be for a construction person to be a destruction person of the railroads. So you can kind of understand how the movies twist things around. But Grierson's here as in charge of the cavalry with Sam Sturgis in charge of the infantry. By the way, a Sam Sturgis descendant, his son was actually killed at Little Bighorn. Kind of sad. Union forces, 4,800 infantry, 3,300 cavalry, the horse soldiers, 400 artillery. They were doing really well. I don't know why I've got artillery and 22 guns. I'm not sure. I guess I'm thinking, I don't know what I put there. I'll look it up some other point. So actually, it's just foolish. I don't get it. But 250 wagons. They had the means to continue to supply that force coming out of Memphis. It's coming out of Memphis. So it's going toward the breadbasket of Mississippi, and the idea is that the Confederates are going to try to do something to block them. Now, I want you to see classic Forrest right here, and I know we got the little pointer. I hate these little pointers. I feel like I'm going to bring down a jet. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, all right, so see that star, and that star. That's Forrest. That's classic Forrest. Forrest was really quite brilliant at saying, I'm going to put myself in the best position to be where I need to be, but I don't know where that is, and rather than just pick a spot and be there and that be the wrong spot, I'm going to actually disperse my forces. Okay? And when I disperse my forces, the enemy, when they're making their commitment to their line of march, I'll then concentrate. I'll bring those forces together, and that's where we'll commit to some kind of battle. Later on, we talk about Wilson. Later on, James Harrison Wilson does to Forrest what Forrest would have done to him in Alabama, because Forrest has dispersed his forces and Wilson won't let him combine. Wilson won't let him bring those forces together. He actually keeps some of those forces separated by a major river. So you've got that sort of thing where, again, somebody like a Wilson will learn how to counteract what a Forrest is doing. And by the way, if you're Ulysses Grant and you want to keep the Confederates from doing their offensive defensive strategy of shifting and using interior lines to move troops around, attack everywhere at the same time. Attack simultaneously across a wide spectrum. And then they can't shift troops from Virginia to Georgia, or Georgia to Virginia, or Georgia to wherever in Mississippi. All right, so again, this force comes out. If it defeats Forrest, that's great. That's perfect. If it goes into the breadbasket of Mississippi and destroys it, that's wonderful. But if it even doesn't accomplish that, as long as it isn't too bad, that's okay, because it's keeping Forrest busy. It's keeping Forrest tied up. And I'm about to show you why that matters. Okay? Here's some more. Well, I got the thing there. Let me go to this one. Anybody see the date? June 10, 1864. June 10. The Atlanta campaign has been underway. The Atlanta campaign has been going forward. And in June 10, when Forrest might want to be in North Georgia or Tennessee or somewhere to wreck Sherman's supply lines, in fact, he was already heading in that direction when word came that this force was coming out of Memphis, and he turned around to meet it. He turned around to deal with it. That is going to tie Forrest down prevent him from being where he needs to be on June 10th at the beginning of the Atlanta campaign. Now, bless his heart, Jeff Davis. And by the way, this is my hat. I love this. Thank you for letting me purchase that. I really am proud of that. I love hats. I love cups and hats. Those are my favorite things. Okay, so anyway, and I got gray. He got blue. So I guess the Americans had to do something. And the reason I said that is because somebody said, can you tell who are the Confederates and who are the Yankees? I just did. The ones that clapped for me and the ones that clapped for you. See, that was a trick. What I did was at Forrest, I got you to expose yourself. I got you to expose yourself. And I'm just going to tell you that there's a force coming in behind you. Better run, retreat if you're a Yankee. All right, so here, okay, so we're coming forward. Here's Forrest total. And remember when we get back, that's the total federal force. This is the total Confederate force, and they're spread out. The reason that I have those forces divided, those are all in those different locations that Forrest is going to try to bring together. Now, Forrest had an artillery chief that he absolutely adored, he thought the world of, but Samuel Freeman has been killed, and Samuel Freeman is no longer available, and he has what he calls the tallow-faced little boy in charge of artillery, who he thinks is really more of a spy than anything else, somebody who's trying to report back to headquarters all the things that he's doing. So he doesn't fully trust John Morton. This will be an engagement in which Morton proves his chops. He shows Forrest that he's a man that you can tie to, as they love to say in the South, that you can be connected with. So Bell, 2,700 people plus, and then Johnson with a smaller force, Lyon, a sort of intermediate force, Rucker with a little larger force there. All of those are troops that are available to Forrest, but they will have to be brought from different locations, which means they will have to be brought at different times. Okay, 8 pieces of artillery, but they're lighter artillery so that you have the chance that they're maneuverable and so forth. Here's a wonderful marker at Bryce's Crossroads. I like it because it gives you the big picture. I couldn't agree more with what was said about maps. Gordon is absolutely right. Maps come and maps go. And if you really wanted to say this is another battle where if you look at the topographical elements of it, that this is a little deceptive. But it isn't quite as bad as all that in this sense because it does let you kind of see the bigger scheme and show you Forrest's thinking. Forrest had no formal education, 6 months of schooling, but no military training, no military education. But he just thought, if I can find where you are, pin you down, and then find some way to get on the ends of the line. He didn't say we should assail their flanks. That was not Forrest. We're going to hit them on the end. That's what he said. And as my friend Ed Bars would have said, this is an example of the classic double envelopment. Because you're going to come around 2 flanks. Hit 2 flanks as much as you can at the same time. Now, I'll just say it this way. Weather, terrain, everything is a factor in Forrest's mind. And Forrest does have a familiarity with this. He was born in Middle Tennessee in a place called Chapel Hill, not in North Carolina with basketball, but in Middle Tennessee, middle of nowhere. He then came eventually pretty early in his life to Mississippi, where he lived for a little while. He had property in Mississippi, Coleman County, Mississippi. He had property in Memphis as well. So he's kind of a little bit all over. And he does go from dirt poor to being, as he said, worth $1.5 million by the time of the war. He does it largely through the controversial slave trade operations that make him a lot of money, but he did not, as he put it, abuse slaves because, again, he wasn't Mother Teresa. He wasn't trying to be Mother Teresa, but he was trying to be practical. If you show that you've abused slaves, how easy is it going to be to sell the slave? You see what I'm saying? I want to sell my car, so I'm going to go beat the hell out of it? I don't think so. You know, that doesn't mean I love it or whatever. It doesn't mean it's very practical. He looked at slaves as commodities to be bought and sold. And it's easier to sell something that you can make more attractive and sellable as you go. Now, what he will do is he will look at the very practical things, common sense, and this is the way he overcomes so many other people who have a lot more learning than he does, because he uses common sense. Hitting them on the ends will compromise their line. The Union position had actually been miles away at a small plantation site, and he knew it would take some time for them to come forward. The cavalry would come first. Two things. They would be there before the infantry, and they would tear up the roads. When I was growing up, my grandfather hated my dad riding those Tennessee Walker horses in front of his house. You've got dust, dirt, you're tearing up the road. Granddaddy hated that. And I think Daddy did it sometimes just to do it. Show him. But anyway, if you tear up the road, especially when it's been a lot of rain and the bottoms of that area, the water, swampy areas are filled up in that area, Tishomingo Creek and the area around, you're going to have a very limited passage, and it's going to be not the best passage you can. The roads aren't corduroy, they're not improved, they're not made better. So the cavalry comes forward. His idea is we're going to engage the cavalry, we're going to defeat them, and then the infantry is going to be given messages to hurry to the front. When they hurry to the front, we'll then beat them as they come, because they'll be winded, they'll be broken down, they'll be winded. Beat the cavalry, then the infantry comes in and we'll defeat the enemy with that, even though they have more troops than we do. He dispatched troops that were sent by a side road to approach this way. He detaches other troops that are sent around on this end, again, so they can hit the flank, and right around the crossroads where he'll engage the enemy and pin them down, the idea would be that he'll hit the flanks and break the line. And eventually, that's what happens. Now, remember, Bell is the largest force that he's got. Tell Bell to move up fast and fetch all he's got. Now, this is another Forrestism that I want you to understand. And then I'm going to speed up a little bit because I don't know how much time is for trying to get out on time. Point is that it says fetch. Forrest would say something and his clerks would write it out. Invariably, one of his clerks that did not seem to know him as well would write bring up. He would send it back and he'd say, I want fetch, because if you use the words bring up, they'll think about it. Now think about how smart that is. Like a dog. Fetch, bring, now, here. If you say bring up, well, when shall I bring them up? What shall I do? Forrest doesn't have time for that. And he doesn't have time for this in this case. Okay. He consolidates, and as he consolidates and brings those forces together, he also pushes Morton's artillery to the front. And that way he can do the most damage with them. Again, we don't have time for everything to try to break it down. But among the troops that he will engage are African American troops who are supposed to have sworn an oath to avenge Fort Pillow, which had happened earlier that year. Here's Abraham Buford. I really love Abe Buford. He's a big old boy. At the start of the war, he's about 300 pounds, so I love him to death. But they said he could dance, and he could drink, and he could do all kinds of things. He has a real reputation. He's from Versailles, Kentucky, and yes, it's not Versailles, it's Versailles, Kentucky. But the point is, yeah, he really was a great subordinate general for Forrest, because he would do the kind of fighting that Forrest wanted. And when Forrest and these troops break the Union lines and send them in full-scale retreat, he continues in pursuit even after Forrest is overcome by heat and exhaustion and has to drop out himself. It's pretty amazing. Now, Forrest will have 29 horses shot out from under him in the war. 29 horses. One of those horses was shot. He put his finger in the bullet hole. When the battle was over, he pulled his finger out of the bullet hole. The horse dropped dead. 29 horses shot out from under him. He will kill 30 enemy soldiers in hand-to-hand. He will say that he was one up on the Yankees by the time the war was over. 30 enemy soldiers for 29 horses. That's how you look at it. Again, these troops will come up. They actually put up really a stout fight, but in the initial engagement, they're actually in the rear protecting the trains, protecting the wagons. And unfortunately, it's kind of a Manassas story, because there's some attempt to bring the wagons on the wrong side of Tishomingo Creek. Then they try to get them back across it, and one of them's overturns on the little bridge, and panic sets in when the bridge is blocked. So That's one of the problems with this battle. It's kind of Manassas-like, even though we're a long way from Manassas. Now, Sherman will refer later to Forrest as the devil, but he certainly was a devil in pursuit here. Okay, now, Andrew Jackson Smith will be the one who is trying to figure out how to then do phase 2 of the keep Forrest occupied operations. If you can defeat him, so much the better. He will actually be involved in operations to try to again tie him in North Mississippi. And again, Forrest tries to anticipate where he will march and what he will do before he strikes back. And again, I mentioned the fact that Stephen D. Lee is here. There's Stephen D. Lee. And at the battle that ends up being the series of battles that comes to be known as Tupelo or Harrisburg, the Confederates have a real difficult time. The Confederates actually have frontal assaults that are very costly. Now, there are times where Forrest does what Forrest likes to do. He's trying to get the Federals while they're still in movement, and he will actually send some cavalry at one point, go into the wagons, kill the mules that are pulling the wagons, and cause all kinds of havoc, only to then be driven back away because it's only really a probing force. It's not enough force to get things done. The big fight itself will be at Harrisburg, and at Harrisburg, the battle is very lopsided and very bloody for the Confederates. Now, true Forrest fashion, in a setback, he will always find someone else to blame. Unfortunately, Forrest, being human, doesn't want to accept responsibility for launching attacks that were perhaps unprepared or unnecessary or in some way flawed. He will say that Lee is the one who pushed, that Lee is the one who wanted this, and to his credit, Lee will say, as commander of these forces, I accept responsibility. So give Lee credit for that. But again, I don't know that he doesn't learn lessons he should have been learned and figured out later on at Ezra Church. But here he is at Tupelo having a setback, and one of the things that happens here is an unusual thing again for Forrest, is he's wounded. Now it's not that he's been wounded before. He's even wounded by one of his own men. We could talk about that later. But he is wounded, but he's wounded in an odd kind of place. It goes along the base of his foot. Now, you and I both know if you get into a stirrup on a horse, Lucy, what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to pressure on the stirrup. If the bottom of your foot has been shot all the heck, think about how painful that will be. It was so painful he could not ride a horse. Now think of that. This is a horseman who can't ride a horse. He was put into a carriage. If you don't think that was humiliating. But then word came that he'd gotten sepsis, he'd gotten gangrene, and he died, and the Yankees were ecstatic. Is Forrest truly dead? Is he really dead? They were ecstatic about the possibility that he was dead. And then unfortunately we got word a little bit later, maybe that's premature wishful thinking more than anything else. Robert Self-Henry, one of the historians who's done a good job, biographers of Forrest, talked about this situation when the situation was desperate, but the remedy he felt was characteristic of Forrest, that you take a desperate situation and attack and do the best you can. Okay, General Forrest is not dead, the dispatches will say, and unfortunately the Federals couldn't celebrate that. Okay, again, now we get into August, that's July. June, he had been tied up at Bryce's Crossroads. July at Tupelo. In August, there's going to be an advance into Mississippi again, with this time Forrest having to be very dramatic and very creative, and he decides he's going to take a picked force, ride around the Union forces that are penetrating into Mississippi, and raid Memphis. And he actually goes into the streets of Memphis. His brother actually rides his horse into the hotel there. They have a big old time. They're trying to capture two primary Union commanders, both of whom flee or are able to escape and elude capture, but he stirs up trouble. He doesn't plan to stay. That's not the point. He's trying to draw that Union force back to Memphis to protect Memphis, just like Sherman's trying to keep Forrest busy in Mississippi so he won't be on his supply lines. June, Bryce's Crossroads, busy. July, Tupelo, busy. Harrisburg, busy. August, Memphis. Even a dramatic raid, newspaper headline, capturing raid, not enough. And here you get, again, all these statements about what Forrest has done. One of my favorites, they may have taken these things down. General Washburn's Escape Alley, that's actually a road sign. Isn't that funny? Isn't that hilarious? His Escape Alley. Okay, so I won't go through all that. Finally, look what happens. Forrest gets on Sherman's supply lines and does some significant damage at Johnsonville when he can attack shipping that's coming on the river, actually sinks some barges and some gunboats and captures some gunboats. He puts this man in charge of one of the gunboats. He says, "I'll only take charge if you promise not to yell at me if I come home wet." In other words, if I lose the gunboat. And Forrest does a wonderful raid. But what is it? October, November 1864. What's wrong with that picture?
Shows we got south.
Atlanta's already gone. Atlanta's already taken. It's fallen. It's not going to do any good. Even if you do something dramatic like killing or capturing or destroying 1 million plus, 6 million plus, who knows? The numbers are incredible for what he may have accomplished with all of the things he destroyed at the Johnsonville Depot. And he was so excited when he had Morton with him and they were firing the artillery and watching the big barrels of liquor that were lighting off and rolling down to the river's edge. And now you had flames and fire and warehouses and destruction. Forrest was thrilled. Unfortunately, it doesn't matter. It's too late. And he says, "There's no doubt we could wipe Sherman off the face of this earth, John, if they give me enough men and you enough guns." But of course, that's not the case either. He's relatively small numbers, and now too late to do anything about it. Sherman, though, here says that devil farce was about Johnsonville making havoc among the gunboats and the transports. This is kind of just an overview of all of that. You don't have to memorize the dates. There's no quiz. And it goes on into 1865 as well, but in 1864, at the end of 1864, I should say, all the way to Forrest actually going to Murfreesboro for a second time where he does not do very well. And what is missing? Atlanta. Atlanta. Why not? Because he didn't get there. He couldn't get there. Sherman kept him away. Myth and reality, I love this. This is what he supposedly said. You know, he's famous for having said, "I got there firstest with the mostest." He wouldn't have this said it's this that wayest, because who is this talks this that wayest? You know what I'm saying? But this is how he probably did say it. Well, and you notice it says wall. Now I don't know all about you, because he's talking to some fellow Confederate officers, and they're sharing their secrets of success. And he says, "I don't know about you, but my ID is to always get the most men there first, and then if you can't whoop them, you outrun them." Now that's farce. I think that's actually what he really said. They got later turned into get there firstest with the mostest. This is the bookist that I want you to know. And I'll leave it up there for other things. But here's my farce stuff, and now I'm done. Thank you very much.